Hello everyone, welcome to the Redmen TV. It is the deep dive. It's me and it's Josh Williams in for this one, and we are going to look at Mo Salah 2.0. It's been a lot of talk about Liverpool 2.0, but certainly there's been an evolution of Mo Salah. I think we can all agree. Josh, 4 assists so far in the Premier League. Is it as simple as he's a creator now?
I don't think it's as simple as that, but it is very early days. But I think if you watch him play and consider the dynamic that we've kind of shifted towards with this new system and new season and all that stuff, the midfielders in the team and things like that, the striker that we're now trying to integrate, I think there's a bit of a case there as to Salah potentially coming away from what he was when we first bought him and moving towards maybe a bit more of an all-rounder or something like that. But we will get into the numbers on that. But as you say, he's posted 4 assists so far in the Premier League this season. That's the joint most with Pedro Neto, who is left-footed. Funny enough, one to keep an eye on.
Well, Josh has got to be in his bonnet about has to be a left foot.
Yeah, well, if he goes in 2024, mate, that's an interesting one, that. But yeah, he virtually posted a hat-trick of assists, didn't he, against Wolves?
He did.
He didn't technically.
He did, though.
But he did, yeah, I agree with you. And he posted 7 assists in pre-season. So it is building that narrative that he's becoming this kind of playmaker as opposed to the guy who puts the ball in the net. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I was going to ask you actually first, why do you think it is?
Well, if we use the board and we consider what Liverpool were when we signed Mo Salah, it was, as you see it there, this lad was a false 9 doing that, and we had Sadio Mane in the team who was doing that, I think from that side of the pitch actually, kind of compensating for what Firmino lacked, in the sense that Firmino didn't score goals and didn't run in behind. So Mane offered that. And when we signed Salah, he would basically offer exactly what Mane would offer, but with a left foot, cutting inside, runs in behind and goals. So when we signed Salah, that's the profile that we wanted. A left footer who would score enough goals for our number 9 to get let off the hook, essentially. Now, obviously the guy who does that special false 9 stuff has left the building. No longer in the team anymore, and we've got kind of like a copycat in Gakpo, but he's not quite in that mould, and I don't think Gakpo's future is Liverpool's false 9 for me personally. The lad who we have got in as like the future of the team, in my opinion, is Darwin Núñez, who's very, very different to Firmino. Does want to threaten him behind, does want to score the goals, does want to poach. So if he's staying there,
no space.
It's a bit messy if everyone's doing that. So it makes a bit of sense if these guys here, especially considering everyone's now doing that and we're forming this box in the middle of the park. It makes sense if our wide men can kind of go 2 ways really, as in like, yes, they can score if they need to, but ideally a bit more creation for this guy in the middle. And I think that's kind of where the shift has been initiated. Whether that was the plan or not, I'd be really interested to know when we signed Núñez. Has this kind of been in the works as a blueprint for years? Or is it something that Klopp is almost stumbling upon and working towards because he's realised Núñez is not like Firmino or what? I don't know what you think.
Hopefully Klopp realised that Núñez was not like Firmino before we signed him, because if he thought he was going to come in and be the false 9, I'm sure that he would have been very disappointed after that first training session and a jest, of course. But
he has just played Joe Gomez as an inverted fullback though.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Liverpool's longest serving player, is he now?
He is, yeah.
Joe Gomez was in 2015, like 3.5 million or something from Charlton, which is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's been in the system a while, so he understands it all. One of the things that I find really interesting about this is I think we saw the green shoots last season. I think towards the back end of last season, even before we went to the box, I felt like Darwin Núñez and Mo Salah had started to get a little bit of an understanding, and it's quite easy to understand what Darwin Núñez is going to do. He's going to run in behind. Yeah. And he's just kind of got to put the ball there. And it's always felt like he's been open to do that, Mo. And I wonder whether there's been a conversation behind the scenes of this is kind of what we're going to want from you. Because what he did from that right-hand side for 6 seasons prior to this year, is almost like, how can you keep repeating that trick? And this is where I find it's really interesting. It's probably not what we wanted to talk about today, but why I find it so interesting is how do you replace Salah in the same way that I don't think you can replace Firmino. I don't think you can replace Salah, and it might mean another change, and it might be a facilitator, a creator, rather than looking for someone who can score 35 goals a year from the right wing with his left boot. I'm just not sure there's that many players out there.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that's probably come into it, to be honest. I think when it comes to like planning the future of the team, you have to factor in that, okay, Salah's still at the club, but he's now 31. Generally, we know, just statistical proof, that as these kind of wide players get older, they dribble less and less. That's because they're getting slower, and they're focusing a bit more on like the end product side of things maybe. And then in terms of the tactical dynamic of Liverpool, when we first emerged as a force on the club, you know, with the 4-3-3 and these three working as a unit like that, as you say, that getting another version of that is virtually impossible. Honestly, it's to get a left footer who is quick enough to threaten him behind the defence and challenges for a golden boot every season is unheard of. Like there's a lot of right footers who do it, to be fair, and that's why, you know, you got Mane there getting replaced by Diaz, who's not that far off, Jota not that far off, Rashford. You know, there's Martinelli. There's a lot of them for right footers. For left footers, there really isn't.
Saka would be my favourite for it, but I don't think he's getting you 35 a season either.
No. I think Saka, to be fair, has got kind of what Salah's doing a bit more lately to him in terms of the two-way stuff. Even amount of goals and assists is what I'm getting at there. But yeah, I think when you're planning for the future of the team, you can't really plan to have another Mo Salah. You've got to come away from that blueprint eventually because he's so rare. And if you can get in the Núñez, who is still learning his trade, but is definitely in the same bracket in terms of being an attacking just magnet, just naturally he can play really bad and score two. You know, we can just get like 7 chances, 8 chances in one game and things like that, cause chaos for an opposition defence. So he's doing it in a different way, but ensuring that Liverpool is still really, really threatening.
Okay. You obviously looked at a little bit of the tactical side of what we did and what we're doing now. Do the numbers back up this Salah 2.0?
Well, I'm going to throw a caveat out there immediately. It's very, very early to be doing this. We shouldn't really be doing this because it's how many games we played? 5. Yeah, so it's a very, very small sample size, but just to show where we're going with this, the numbers do kind of reinforce what we're saying. So first viz that you can see there is just shots per 90 by Mo Salah in the Premier League for every one of his seasons in England. As you can see, his first season shot was his best in terms of shots, upwards of like 4.5 per 90, which is crazy for a wide player. Obviously he didn't end up being a wide player anyway, he cut inside a lot, but that was his best season. And if you look at that in comparison to what he's posting so far this season, he's under 3 for possibly the first time in his career since, I think Roma was about that, to be honest, maybe. Off the top of my head, I think it was, because he was feeding, he had a Dzeko.
Yeah.
So Dzeko was kind of the Núñez, if you want, now for Liverpool. And Salah's a bit more of a facilitator, a bit more of a creator. But if you look at those numbers there, that is interesting that Salah is currently at least posting fewer shots per 90 than he ever has. I think against Wolves over the weekend, I think he only posted 1. But registered a hat-trick of assists as well, so that's quite interesting. And then if you move along and do it in expected goals terms, naturally, if you're shooting less, your expected goals will come down, and that will be less as well. Mm-hmm. But again, if you look at his first season, it's insane, isn't it?
It's ridiculous.
That is exactly why he ended up breaking the Premier League record when it comes to goals. I think he scored 34, was he?
I can't remember
32,
exactly,
something like that, I can't remember what it was. But he scored a lot anyway. And he's generally posted like upwards of 0.5 expected goals per 90 over the course of his Liverpool career. So far this season, again, he's under 0.4 per 90, which does suggest that in terms of finishing the move, taking the shots, putting the ball in the net, being that player for Liverpool, he's maybe doing it a bit less than he ever has. And then if we look at, is he actually creating more? Again, it's pretty clear that he definitely is. I think his average over the course of his Liverpool career looks like it's just under 2 chances created per 90. So far this season, he's on about 2.5 per 90, and that's visualised there in terms of key passes. A key pass, for a bit of perspective, is just setting up a shot for a teammate, and he's kind of going beyond his ceiling, or what his ceiling previously was at Liverpool anyway. So I think if you couple that in with the fact he's shooting
more,
exactly, it does kind of reinforce the early narrative, at least, that he's becoming a bit more of a creative spark, a bit more of a playmaker maybe for Liverpool.
So interestingly, I remember I looked at this on FB Ref. It is on my iPad screen, but we don't have to go to it if you're not set up for it. In 2018-19, Mo's non-penalty expected goals plus expected assisted goals was 0.93 per 90. That was the highest year until this year so far. Again, ridiculously small sample size.
Yeah.
But actually his non-penalty expected goals plus his expected assists is higher. It's now 0.98 per game, which again is crazy because of how good that first season was, but he is assisting more as well as still getting those goals.
But that's really interesting though, because that suggests that in an offensive sense in the final third, you're still getting roughly the same output from Salah numerically, but he's just tampered with the dynamic a little bit, to the extent where rather than being like, say, 70-30 in favour of a scorer, maybe he's now 50-50, or potentially even leaning towards being more of a creator now. We'll see as the season goes along, but it does feel like a bit of a quiet evolution so far, and I think people will probably need more evidence to be completely convinced. But first 5 games of the season so far, it looks like a slightly more of a reborn version of him, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What was the one where you kind of realised it, first of all, this season?
Well, I think there was a moment against Newcastle. The second goal, was it? When he got fed by Salah and Núñez?
Yeah.
Was it?
I think it was the second goal, yeah.
Well, one of them anyway. Salah plays the feeding ball for Núñez in the middle of I think Salah's about here on the pitch, and Núñez is running in behind. And he obviously finishes with superb precision and things like that, and ends up winning the game for Liverpool. But it just kind of hit home at the time when I seen it, because just historically, since Salah's been on Merseyside, like, Salah's always been that player running in behind, and someone's been feeding him. And this is kind of the first time really where Salah is the one feeding Núñez. You see what I mean? It's a really new dynamic for him, and I think there was a few moments last season where, when Núñez was playing up top, Salah would get the ball here and he'd cut inside naturally like he always does, but rather than laying it off here, or maybe to Firmino here
and making a run,
and like a 1-2 or something like that, Núñez would threaten him behind the opposition back line and maybe do a little bit of that, and Salah would play like a really penetrative reverse ball almost in the direction of Núñez. I think he scored 1 or 2 in those situations, or certainly got a few shots off. But again, that's a dynamic that hasn't previously been there, and I think all of this just kind of stems from like the tactical landscape around Salah kind of shifting over the course of the past 12 months or so because of the new players that he's playing with.
Absolutely. I've actually got a couple of little graphics myself to highlight this, and you can see it on my iPad here, and I think the first side, left-hand side of your screen here, is Mo Salah 23-24 in the 5 games so far. Right-hand side is the exact same 5 games last season. So, right. Home and away. Away against Chelsea, home against Villa, home against Bournemouth, away against Newcastle, away against Wolves. They're the 5 games. I've tried to do it as best I can. Obviously, teams change.
Yeah.
You know, but that's as close as I can get. I could look at it over the course of the full season, but comparing that to 5 games seems a little bit stupid when you've got the ability to compare 5 games to 5 games. So his total touches were 41.35 per 90. That's less than last season in those particular 5 games. Obviously, one of those games is a 9-0 that he doesn't score in, isn't it? Is that right? Salah didn't score in the 9-0 against Bournemouth at home?
I think so, yeah.
Which was wild. But again, just on the heat map, Josh,
yeah,
he's deeper, like considerably deeper.
Yeah. And to be fair as well, I should point out probably that this season we've had a few red cards.
Yeah, that's true.
That might have impacted him a little bit, but even the fact that he's coming deeper, I think, is interesting compared to last season, where he's just exclusively, certainly attacking half, but also primarily like final third, really, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he's kind of got that real balance. You know what I was saying earlier about like maybe like a 50-50 attacker creator, or maybe a bit more in favour of being an attacker, considering how much he's touching the ball in the penalty box there. But if you look at now, it is a lot deeper. He's primarily getting on the ball, really on the edge of the final third, really, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably
that's what
his
I mean.
biggest sort of heat map. And there, was it last season in those 5 games, inside the area, obviously the right-hand side's got a little something to say, but inside the area, it's a lot less over there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on then.
I think generally, you know, heat maps, I'm generally quite careful with them, but that is literally the perfect kind of heat map comparison that pretty much captures exactly what we're talking about for this show, really.
Absolutely, thank you. So we're going to move on then. In those games last season, on the right-hand side here, I'm just going to change the colour of this because it didn't really work. I'm going to go to yellow. In those games last season, 4 key passes, 0.93 per 90. 12 key passes, 5 games, sorry. 12 key passes in 5 games, 2.51 per 90. And interestingly, his key passes are all in that area of the field that he's not in as much. But when he's getting into those areas, he's actually looking for more passes, because probably previously, little cut in, little shot off.
Yeah, exactly.
So playing a little bit deeper, more key passes in the penalty area, go figure. But again, you know, interesting. And then I've done this one as a heat map rather than the touches, but the progressive passes this season hide up the field. What I'm getting from this is, when he was in this area of the field last season, here, he tended to pass, but he spent more time here dribbling and shooting.
Yeah.
Whereas this season, when he gets into this area of the field now, he's looking for the pass, not the shot. That's what that tells me.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
And then finally, progressive carries, almost exactly the same area of the field, yet 4.8 per 90 to last season in those 5 games, nearly 8 per 90.
Yeah.
So he's not dribbling as much anymore.
It's almost halved.
Yeah, that's quite a significant difference. And I know it's early doors, but I think we're painting a picture here, Josh, aren't we, of maybe not necessarily a Salah 2.0, but a different Salah in this system.
Yeah.
Who can still be the goal getter when we need him to be the goal getter. And there'll be games where he is the goal getter, and we might just go, yeah, today, lad, go and play a bit higher up. You've got Gakpo in the middle in the 9. But right now, it's looking like Salah has changed his game while Liverpool have changed theirs.
Yeah, exactly. I think regardless of how we use him, I think he's always going to be that kind of output merchant who just delivers for you in the final third with goals and assists. I think he will always be like that, and he'll always offer that really valuable left-footed dynamic that none of his teammates can offer apart from Harvey Elliott. But the way in which he's being used, as you say, we are moving really early on this, but it does look like it's kind of emerging as a trend. It'd be interesting to see if it's intentional or not. It'd be nice to ask Klopp about that, you know, see if he responds or kind of disguises it or anything like that. But it's certainly one to watch, and it kind of does capture like the development of this new team that Klopp keeps referencing. I think he said the other day that it makes no sense to kind of create like a replica of that team. It makes sense to build a new team, and getting in Núñez is he's a very different player to what we had before. Even last summer, getting in Carvalho, again, very different to what we had before. Szoboszlai, Harvey Elliott, Jones, these are really different to the number 8s we previously had. We previously had like lieutenants who were like, you know, inclined to cover for us and offer defensive stability and stuff, whereas now we've got ball players. Trent is becoming an inverted fullback now. Robertson's becoming a centre-back, so it's a proper new team, proper new way of working. And Salah's kind of quiet development there, quiet evolution, kind of captures that, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to talk about before we wrap this show up is, how does the midfield dynamic work with the changing of the front 3, as it were? Because I always thought that, and I've said this a lot on this show, that Diaz works really well with Núñez, and this new version of Salah works really well with Núñez, because they both like to come into these areas and he's going there. Whereas I always kind of felt like Jota with Núñez kind of crowds it, and old Salah would kind of crowd it, like you sort of alluded to before. But you know, when you change out Wijnaldum, Fabinho and Jordan Henderson for, let's say, a shiny new number 6 in January, McAllister, Szoboszlai, or Jones, McAllister, Szoboszlai, do you think we're essentially saying, right, we wanted 60 goals from our front three players in previous years, Firmino, Salah, Mane? Are we saying we want 60 goals from these players this year?
Yeah, I think we obviously still want the same kind of totals, and we still want to create the same output and things like that in the final third, but I do think the midfielders have probably had an impact on the need for the wide players to come inside. Salah's still going to do that, and Diaz and Jota or whoever it is over there is still going to do that as well. But because of the nature of the box, obviously if Trent is inverting like that, these two lads push on and occupy them false nine spaces in the centre. Núñez then stays there. So there's a bit more of an emphasis on Salah to stay wider, Diaz or whoever it may be to stay wider.
And get those one-on-ones.
Yeah, and maybe get into the byline and then feed these. I think it's interesting that City have recently signed Jeremy Doku, for example, who, to be fair to him, scored against West Ham over the weekend, but he's not a goal scorer, mate.
He's a dribbler.
He's an absolute dribbling monster, and he will just do that every single week relentlessly, because Guardiola is creating this box in the middle, attracting everyone in there and creating one-on-ones out wide for him. So,
and Grealish before that, you know, dribbler who's going to go past his man.
Yeah, so Salah, be interesting to see whether he wants this to happen, to be honest, because he's a headlines guy and he wants to be in the goals and that, and maybe this is going to impact that a little bit. Maybe he's going to be now a bit more unselfish and a bit more of a facilitator, but it will benefit the team. And Salah's good enough to just do whatever you ask of him, to be honest. He can be that dribbler, he can be a creator. His passing's always been underrated for me, but he can still be that scorer that we'll probably still need at times. But yeah, with Szoboszlai here now, and Núñez staying there rather than going away, there's not as much of a need for Salah to cut inside and make them inverted movements. But he will still do it, still Salah.
And one final thing, obviously we've seen over the years when Liverpool were at their absolute best, teams just parked the bus against us. And we created a side, I think, and we're creating a side, I think, that is made to beat a parked bus, and yet the problem we've had is everyone's attacking us. And I think, you know, that behind the right back has always been an issue since we've moved into this formation. It was an issue before we moved to this formation.
Yeah.
I think the only thing Liverpool can do is snot teams who come and try and attack us and force them back into parking the bus.
Yeah.
Do you think we've got a side that can do both, or do you think it leans one way or the other?
I have touched on Liverpool being a bit top heavy so far this season. I think the squad captures that. But the Villa game in particular gave me a lot of confidence, and I've lost a bit of that because of Wolves, but then Gomez played this Trent in that game and McAllister was shattered, so I'm not taking too much from that. But the Villa game in particular showed me that despite being a team of forwards essentially, they can play within themselves, they can play with a brain, slow it down. Yeah, crucially accelerate the game when the moment is right. Robertson can stay, but he's not just a relentless, you know, Duracell bunny marathon man up the pitch. He can just kind of stay when he's needed to. Trent in particular is so important to this team in terms of, like, if he's on it, like mentally, in terms of his decision making, Liverpool will be on it, because he will control the game and just accelerate every one of Liverpool's attacks when he wants that to happen. You know what I mean? Whereas when he's a bit off it decision wise, Liverpool seem a bit chaotic because he's trying so much, and Liverpool get done on the break a little bit more than that. But Trent is the key, and yeah, Trent's the man behind this system. Absolutely.
Okay, there you go. That's been the deep dive for today. If you want more deep dives, then it's available on redmenplus.com. We do 2 a week when there's football on. When there's not football on, we'll do 1 a week and we'll just put it on Plus, because it's really hard to talk about football when there's no football, as we found out during the pandemic. Josh, thank you so much for this one. In the other deep dive that we did earlier on today, we looked at Wolves and Klopp's changes, and that was really interesting as well, and how we tried to sort of make up for Trent not being there, I suppose. But yeah, that's obviously the evolution of Salah. Looking forward to what we've got upcoming. Josh, thank you for today, much appreciated.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video. It does help us. Comment and subscribe. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the content today. If you want to get your name in and amongst these wonderful people, then head to redmenplus.com. Join as a Legend tier subscriber. You're going to get free merchandise codes. You're going to get in our Discord, and you're going to get your name at the end of YouTube videos. Yes, redmenplus.com, Legend tier status.